Have you ever imagined being just an ordinary person, living a life of hard work, far from the spotlight, only to have your destiny completely turned upside down by a single gesture, one charged with a celestial power that would echo for centuries? We're talking about a biblical figure whose journey is so extraordinary that many consider it even more impactful than that of his own master. This man didn't just carry on his predecessor's legacy. He multiplied it in astounding ways, performing twice the number of miracles and proving that true spiritual authority isn't about who you were, but how willing you are to be in God's hands. Get ready to dive into the story of a man who turned the ordinary into the extraordinary, whose bold actions reveal the secret to a life fully surrendered to a divine purpose. If you're searching for mountain-moving faith and courage that defies the impossible, this story is for you. But who was this mysterious man? How did a simple farmhand become the vessel for miracles, so spectacular that his very grave still held the power of resurrection? And more importantly, what can his audacity in asking for a double portion of his master's spirit teach us today? In the next few minutes, we'll unravel the fascinating journey of Elisha, the prophet who didn't fear leaving everything behind to embrace a calling that would lead him to perform wonders that defy human logic. From floating axe heads to entire armies being struck blind, every step Elisha took reveals the magnitude of a God who moves through available hearts. So, take a deep breath, because this isn't just an ancient account. It's an invitation for you to re-evaluate your own calling. Elisha's life is a mirror reflecting the divine potential in human vessels. And what you're about to discover could revolutionize your perspective on faith. And believe me, the end of this journey is as surprising as it is inspiring. Elisha's journey began in the most common of places. Picture the scene. A man, a rural worker, guiding 12 yoke of oxen, sweating under the sun in relentless fieldwork. Life had settled into a predictable, grueling rhythm. It was in this setting of sweat and soil that the unimaginable happened. Without any warning, the most prominent prophet of his era, Elijah, simply appeared. There were no words, no speeches, just a single gesture that carried the weight of an age. Elijah approached Elisha, and without further ado, threw his mantle over him. To most, it would have just been a prophet tossing a piece of cloth onto a farmer. But for Elisha, the meaning was crystal clear. That mantle wasn't just a cloak. It was a symbol of the divine call, an undeniable invitation. It was the voice of God saying, "I have something far greater for you." Elisha didn't hesitate. His response was immediate, showing a rare readiness for obedience. He left the oxen, ran after Elijah, and made just one request. "Let me say goodbye to my parents, and then I will follow you." It was the final nod to the life he knew. But his actions went further. Elisha knew that to fully embrace the new, he had to burn the bridges to his past. He returned to the field, took the oxen that represented his livelihood and his security, and slaughtered them. He used the wood from the plows, his tools of the trade, as firewood to cook the meat in a farewell feast. By burning his means of subsistence, Elisha sent a clear message to himself and to God. There is no turning back. My old life is behind me. I am a man wholly dedicated to the Lord's purpose. It was a powerful declaration of total surrender. This act challenges us to reflect. How many times does God call us in the middle of our routines, inviting us to abandon our safety net to embrace a higher purpose? The question remains, are we willing to say yes with the same radical commitment as Elisha? It's important to note that Elisha's journey didn't begin with thunderous miracles. He started as a servant. He spent years by Elijah's side, watching, learning, a humble disciple. God was shaping his character, teaching him humility before entrusting him with authority. He didn't seek the stage. He sought to serve. And it was in this quiet place that God prepared him for the most spectacular displays of his anointing. If this part of the story has already spoken to your heart, I invite you to make an act of faith. Write in the comments, "Do not be afraid, for I am with you." This declaration from God for your life will strengthen your faith to carry on. Continuing Elisha's saga, after his radical surrender, he entered a period of intense service and discipleship. He didn't start his ministry performing miracles, but by acting as an assistant, someone who poured water on Elijah's hands. The man who would perform twice the miracles began as a dedicated servant, showing that the road to authority is first paved with humility. And then the day came that would change everything: Elijah's ascension to heaven. Elijah, sensing his departure was near, tried several times to dismiss Elisha, perhaps to test his loyalty. He would say, "Stay here," but Elisha's response was an unshakable oath: "As surely as the Lord lives, I will not leave you." This scene repeated, and Elisha's persistence was unbreakable. He knew something transcendent was about to happen, and refused to miss it. His determination wasn't stubbornness. It was a holy hunger for something only heaven could grant. Finally, Elijah, seeing his disciples' persistence, asked the question that would unlock the door to power. "Tell me, what can I do for you before I am taken from you?" Elisha could have asked for wealth or fame, but his answer, loaded with unbelievable audacity, was, "Let me inherit a double portion of your spirit." Think about the boldness. It wasn't about having the same power as Elijah, but doubling the anointing, the authority, and the responsibility. Elijah, recognizing the depth of the request, replied, "You have asked a difficult thing. Nevertheless, if you see me when I am taken from you, it will be yours." Suddenly, the sky ripped open. A chariot of fire with horses of fire appeared, separating the master from the disciple. And in a glorious whirlwind, Elijah was taken up into heaven. In shock, Elisha cried out, my father, the chariots and horsemen of Israel." When the vision faded, something remained: the mantle. The same cloak that had called him in the field now lay on the ground, a visible testament to a transferred anointing. Elisha picked it up, went to the Jordan River, and in an act of faith cried out, "Where now is the Lord, the God of Elijah?" He struck the water with the mantle, and it parted, revealing a dry path. It was official. The double portion had been granted. There, a new era of miracles began, the story of the man who would be known as the prophet of wonders. This passage is a masterclass in spiritual succession and the cost of the anointing. Elisha shows us that desiring a double portion isn't arrogance, but a hunger for more of God to serve a greater purpose. With Elijah's mantle in his hands, Elisha began to manifest God's power. He became a living vessel for miracles that revealed God's caring nature. His first act was in Jericho, a city whose water was toxic, causing death and barrenness. Elisha called for a new bowl with salt, went to the spring, threw the salt in, and declared in the Lord's name, "I have healed this water." Instantly, the curse was broken, and the water became pure. But his ministry also showed the severity of divine justice. When a group of youths from Bethel mocked him, yelling, "Get out of here, Baldy!" Elisha rebuked them in the Lord's name, and 2 bears came out of the woods and mauled them. A harsh lesson about scoffing at divine authority. In contrast, Elisha's compassion was evident. A desperate widow, whose sons were about to be taken as slaves to pay a debt, sought him out. Elisha asked what she had in her house. "Only a small jar of oil," she replied. He instructed her to borrow many empty jars from her neighbors, and in her home, pour the oil. The oil miraculously multiplied, filling every single jar. With the sale of the oil, she paid her debts and supported her family, a testament to how God provides for our needs. Another touching miracle occurred in Shunem. A wealthy but childless woman who often hosted Elisha received a promise from him that she would have a son, which came true. Years later, the boy fell ill and died. The desperate mother ran to Elisha. He went to her house, lay over the boy's body in intense prayer, and the child sneezed 7 times and came back to life, a demonstration of God's dominion over death. His ministry was marked by provision. During a famine, he purified a poisonous stew with just a handful of flour. On another occasion, with only 20 loaves of bread, he fed 100 men with food left over, revealing God's abundance amid scarcity. One of his most famous miracles was the healing of Naaman, a leprous Syrian general. Naaman expected a grand ceremony, but Elisha simply sent the messenger to say, "Go, wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan River." Naaman was insulted by the simplicity, but was convinced by his servants to obey. On the 7th dip, his skin was restored. A lesson that simple obedience and practical faith open the way for God's power. Unfortunately, Elisha's servant Gehazi, driven by greed, lied to get gifts from Naaman. As a consequence, Naaman's leprosy was transferred to him, a severe warning against exploiting God's anointing. God even cared about the small details. When the iron head of a borrowed axe fell into the water, the man who lost it was distraught. Elisha cut a stick, threw it into the water, and the axe head floated. A simple miracle, but one that shows God's concern for our daily worries. Each of these wonders reveals an aspect of God's character, his compassion, justice, provision, and sovereignty. Elisha wasn't just a reclusive prophet. His influence was national. He was an advisor to kings, a prophetic voice in unstable times. Even idolatrous monarchs sought him in crisis. Once, the armies of Israel, Judah, and Edom were stranded without water in the desert. In desperation, the king sought Elisha. He rebuked the idolatrous king of Israel, but out of respect for the God-fearing king of Judah, he prophesied. He called for a musician, and as the music played, he declared, "Dig ditches in this valley. You will see neither wind nor rain, yet this valley will be filled with water." The next day, water appeared from nowhere, saving the armies. Elisha also served as an invisible guardian for Israel. He could hear the secret war plans of the king of Syria and warn the king of Israel, foiling numerous ambushes. Furious, the Syrian king sent an army to capture Elisha. The prophet's servant awoke to see the city surrounded and panicked. But Elisha calmly said, "Don't be afraid. Those who are with us are more than those who are with them." Then he prayed for the young man's eyes to be opened. The servant saw the surrounding hills filled with horses and chariots of fire, a celestial legion protecting them. A powerful reminder that even when we feel surrounded, an unseen army fights for us. During the terrible siege of Samaria, famine was so extreme that the king, in despair, blamed Elisha. But the prophet declared with unwavering faith, "About this time tomorrow, there will be abundant and cheap food at the gate of Samaria." It seemed insane. But that night, God caused the Syrian army to hear the sound of a great army approaching. They fled in panic, leaving all their supplies behind. The next day, the city was fed, just as Elisha had prophesied. In a time of idolatry and war, he was a point of balance, showing that God reigns above all thrones and strategies. Time moved on, and Elisha, the man who had healed so many, fell ill with the sickness that would lead to his death. Even the greatest instruments of God face mortality. Yet even in his final days, his anointing did not fade. King Joash of Israel visited him and wept, saying the same words Elisha had cried out to Elijah, my father, the chariots and horsemen of Israel." It was an acknowledgement that the prophet's presence was worth more than armies. Even on his deathbed, Elisha taught one last lesson. He had the king shoot an arrow, declaring it the Lord's arrow of victory over Syria. Then he told him to strike the ground with the remaining arrows. The king struck only 3 times. Elisha, indignant, said, "You should have struck 5 or 6 times. Then you would have completely defeated Syria. But now you will defeat them. Only 3 times." A final lesson. Incomplete faith and partial obedience lead to partial victories. And then Elisha died and was buried. But if you think the story ends here, get ready for the surprising conclusion we promised. Sometime later, men were burying a body when they spotted invaders. In their haste, they threw the body into the nearest tomb, Elisha's. The moment the dead man's body touched the prophet's bones, the unimaginable happened. The man revived and stood on his feet. A posthumous miracle, a sign that God's anointing transcends death itself. Elisha performed twice the miracles of his master, fulfilling the promise of the double portion. His legacy is monumental, not because he was perfect, but because he was an available vessel in God's hands. He teaches us that when we live in total surrender, even our bones can be channels of life. Elisha's story isn't just about a prophet from the past. It's about us today. We are also called to live with radical faith, to believe that God can use ordinary people to do extraordinary things. Who knows what he wants to do through you? Elisha's life is an invitation for each of us to embrace our calling. If we are willing to listen, obey with boldness, and believe, God will work miracles through our lives. If you were touched by this story and want to continue exploring the truths of the Word, subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next videos. Tell us in the comments, what did you learn from Elisha's life that you can apply to your own journey? May God bless your life with the same faith, courage, and double portion that he granted Elisha.